Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237 as I delve deeper into my Alfred Hitchcock marathon. And this time I do another film starring Jimmy Stewart. One that I've heard of, I know a lot of people like, even though it didn't do very well when it first came out. 1948's Rope, which is based off the 1929 play of the same name, which in turn is based off, because as I'm watching it, I'm looking at the two characters, and I'm like, the two main characters, and I'm like, they look and kind of act like Leopold and Loeb, which is in this Most Notorious Crimes book that I have, Leopold and Loeb. It turns out that's what the play was inspired by. These two guys who kidnapped a 14-year-old for ransom and killed him. But anyway, this was a phenomenal movie. I might even put this over Rear Window. I don't know how controversial that will be, but Rear Window was a great film anyway, but this was, I mean, great performances, very anxiety-filled. It's known for taking place in real time in one setting, which I guess this was one of two films he did about with the limited setting, or the second of his limited setting. The first was a film called Lifeboat, which of course I haven't seen. It all takes place in this penthouse apartment. But the film's about an hour and a half long, and from the time it starts to the time it ends, that's how much time goes by in the film's time. And it's edited in such a way that it all looks like one continuous take. I mean, like, sometimes the camera will, like, go up to someone's back and go black, and then when it pulls out, it'll be a different cut. But even so, it's very, very long cuts, very long takes. It was Alfred Hitchcock's first color film. It says it only has 9 different takes, so I'm guessing it has 9 cuts in the whole film. Except for the opening credits, it was filmed entirely in a soundstage. It was shot in several 8-minute uninterrupted takes, which was the maximum amount of film the camera could hold. The crew wheeled the props and furniture out of the way as the camera moved around on set. There are only 2 intentionally visible cuts during the main body of the movie, when the maid enters to announce a telephone call, and another when Jimmy Stewart explains his theory about what happened, which, yeah, that's when the camera goes up against someone's back. It literally opens up with our two main characters, Brandon and Philip. Brandon is played by John Dahl, and Philip is played by Farley Granger. They are strangling a fellow classmate of theirs to death with a piece of rope. And, you know, they're two, the three are, you know, they've known each other since childhood. They're very wealthy, went to the same boarding school. And the whole idea is, Brandon is he's the mastermind. He's like this narcissistic, very charming mastermind of the whole thing, and Philip is he's the one that suffers all the anxiety and the apprehension. But the idea behind the murder was they murder him, they put him in this chest, and then they have this party where they invite, you know, the kid's parents, a former prep school housemaster, other friends of theirs over there with the idea to have his dad look at these first edition books that they have. But Brandon takes it a step further by taking candlesticks and tablecloth, putting it over the chest, and eating off the chest during this party. Because their former housemaster, played by Jimmy Stewart, is sort of this Nietzschean kind of philosopher who believes that murder should be an art form for those who are socially and intellectually superior. They should be allowed to kill those who are socially and intellectually inferior. And shouldn't really be a crime. It's an art form, pulling off the perfect crime. And Brandon wants to prove this to Jimmy Stewart. And the whole film revolves around, that party. And how Brandon he's really dropping hints to everyone. Actually, the kid they kill, his name is David. His dad is there with, I don't really even know if it says who she is. If it's like his aunt or which actually Sir Cedric Hardwicke plays his dad. And he was in one of the Frankenstein films. He was in Ghost of Frankenstein as Henry Frankenstein. Okay, that's where because I didn't recognize him. I recognized the name. But who the hell was that lady? His aunt. Okay, so it must have been is probably his mother's sister, because his mother didn't attend because she has a cold. But also the departed's fiance, who's a former lover of Brandon's, and her ex in between, Kenneth, in hopes to get them back together. And it really does feel like a play, like sort of like Glengarry Glen Ross. It feels like a play brought straight from the stage to the screen, and not like a musical, but because it's all like very limited sets, characters in and out of scenes, very small cast. The camera is since there's no cuts, at least that you can see, other than the two intentional that you can catch, it's hardly ever still, but when it is still, it's there for a while. It's always panning, it's always moving throughout the apartment, and it's just brilliantly made. I love simple, like very simple concept films with a lot of technicalities in it, or technical proficiency, I should say. And Jimmy Stewart, he's not quite the everyman that he is in Rear Window. He's not morally ambiguous. He's actually kind of hard to read, because like when he usually answers questions with questions, or he kind of answers with like the aunt and the fiance of the deceased, they're talking about films they saw recently and actors they find attractive, and they'll be like, oh, well, I much rather choose Cary Grant. And he's just like, oh, really? Is he? Are they? Yeah. But Jimmy Stewart's great in this. All the performances are excellent. Although I will say, what's her name? Constance Collier plays the aunt. She reminded me of, may he rest in peace, Terry Jones from Monty Python when he plays that kind of uh, upper class older lady. It just, for some reason, she just reminded me of Terry Jones. And, Braden just has this cocky charm. He's very proud of what he did. And Philip is getting increasingly more drunk and paranoid. Almost to the point where at the end, it's almost like Telltale Heart. But, slowly Jimmy Stewart's kind of putting together what's happened because of the behavior of Brandon and Philip, and just the stories of why David's not around yet, the contradictions in conversation, the housekeeper, because Brandon and Philip aren't brothers, but they live together. Everyone's leaving. She goes to hand Jimmy Stewart his hat. She gives him the wrong one, and when he looks inside, he sees DK. David Kentley, which is the victim's initials, and he starts putting it together. And I love the tracking shots, and I just remember watching and thinking, like, this has all been one fucking shot. One continuous shot. I couldn't pick any cuts. And then the two obvious ones I did. But my favorite shot of the film, and this is the most Hitchcockian, anxiety-filled scene, is the party's pretty much over. Everyone's kind of talking about where could David be. His mother just called. She's been calling everywhere and they can't find him. But no one's in the shot. Everyone's over here out of frame. The camera is on the chest that he's in. And the housemaid is clearing off the table. The food dishes, going all the way back to the kitchen, all the way back, then bringing more of those books back in, goes all the way back, gets the candles, goes all the way back, tablecloth, and eventually, because she's bringing the books in to put in the chest, and like everyone is still talking off camera, and you're just waiting, that anticipation. Every time she walks away and comes back, she's a step closer to opening that chest. And eventually she does, but she opens it like this much, and then she stopped. I love Glenn Ross as a film like this, where limited time, more sets. There's more places in Glenn Ross, and the performances and the characters and going from the stage to the screen. This is a very different film, but I might even put this over it. This was just I love how this film was made. I love the idea of one room, limited characters, two cuts that you can see, all one, looks like one continuous take. Takes place in real time, from the murder to pretty much their downfall. Which even at the end of the film, because Jimmy Stewart, after he realizes they have his hat there, he starts putting it together. And he rings back up and says, "Hey, I left my a cigarette case upstairs." So he goes up and he kind of puts it somewhere so it looks like he left it. And right after he gets them to crack, because Philip is just more and more drunk and not okay. That when Jimmy Stewart explains what happens, the camera is going everywhere he says. He's like, because Brandon has a gun in his pocket, and he's like, what do you think happened? And he says, well, Janet, the fiance, kind of put the idea in my head that you kidnapped him and put him somewhere so you could get her and Kenneth back together. Because earlier they talk about how it must have happened in broad daylight, and Brandon's getting excited. And he's like, well, if you think I did, what would you have done? And he's like, well, I would have invited him over here. You would have and the camera zooms in on the door, and he's like, you would have let him in. Then it pans over to the closet, and he's like, you would have taken his hat and his coat. You would have invited him in here for a drink. He would have sat down, goes to the chair, and it shows us everything that happened. Because the film opens with them strangling him. So he pieces it together for us. The camera takes us to all those places, but we still, even though we don't get to see it, the camera pretty much gives us the canvas and we get to paint it in our minds. And I thought that was an excellent idea. The very ending where, Jimmy Stewart does look in the chest, and Brandon says, you've always said superior people can kill inferior. It's not crime, it's art. It is kind of a bit, I would say a little melodramatic for Jimmy Stewart to find his humanity. Be like, you make me regret every belief I've ever had about superiority and inferiority. Like, you decided he was an inferior human being and you took his life because of it. And he's like, I hope you two, you're going to get caught. They're going to kill you, and I'm glad for it. He empties the gun out the window. We hear people come up, and then the film ends. Not much to say because, it all takes place in one apartment, limited characters, very simple setting. They murder a friend, invite those closest to him to have a party in the same room where his body is, where no one knows, to pull off the perfect crime. But since it's Hitchcock, that simple idea, there's just so much technical proficiency and things to marvel at. Like the seemingly one shot, the way he can build suspense with the housemaid just clearing off the chest very slowly and painstakingly while everyone else is talking. Just excellent film. And Psycho is still my favorite Hitchcock film. It's my third favorite film of all time. But starting out this marathon, having only seen Psycho, and starting out with Rear Window and Rope, this is going to be a great fucking marathon. When this came out, it didn't do very well. For years and years, it was considered the underseen and underrated gem of Alfred Hitchcock. But then in recent years, it's sort of had a resurgence, and people have reassessed it. It has a 94 on Rotten Tomatoes. It's become a favorite, a fan favorite of many. It's now one of mine. I really would put this over Rear Window, but I mean the margin's very, very narrow between the two because I loved Rear Window as well. But this was a phenomenal film. Loved Rope. This was... It's kind of hard to believe it didn't do that well, and I think it's because the play was still going on, and A lot of people just thought he just took what you could see on stage and put it on screen without any kind of showy kind of flair, I guess. In front of the camera, not behind it. I don't really know. I was reading about it. I mean, a lot of people just thought that, the limited sets and the camera was moving around too much to show action because there wasn't any action. The performances were praised, but the dialogue was kind of criticized. This is all upon initial release. And then other people just went on to say it's just not one of his best. It felt more like an experiment, I guess. But, yeah, in more recent years, people really looked at it as just the Hitchcock masterpiece that it is. And I agree. I enjoyed every second of this film. I just kept marveling at how, how great the real time and the seemingly one take it's like really watching something happen. Like we really are in this room with these people throughout the duration of this dilemma. Because I'd never quite seen something like that. Other movies that are seemingly one take, like say Birdman with Michael Keaton, happens over a period of several days. And other films that are in real time. Well, actually, there's that, was it Silent House? It's in real time in one take. I liked this more than Silent House, but yeah, I fucking loved this movie. This is a great, great, great fucking film. I loved everything about it. The story, the way it was filmed, the real time, the performances. I even liked the dialogue, the characters. I mean, you really felt the anxiety of Philip, and you were like charmed, but really just kind of, I just wanted to see Brandon get his at the same time. And Jimmy Stewart was great. Kind of enigmatic, but also great. Fucking phenomenal film. This was wonderful. Great experience watching Rope. I loved it. Let me know what you think of Rope. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, but I fucking loved this movie. But thank you for watching.